Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Broyles, and on behalf of the Office of Family Assistance and the Peer Technical Assistance Team, we'd like to welcome you to the fourth and final webinar, Improving Employment Outcomes, in our Tribal TANF Case Management Series. We appreciate your participation, and as always, we look forward to another great session. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. First of all, if you have any technical difficulties or questions, please use the chat feature to contact Deidre Young or myself, Stephen Broyles, and we'll try to follow up with you as soon as possible. We're going to make sure we have time near the end to try to answer as many questions as possible. But if you have questions throughout the webinar today, please feel free to use the Q&A box located on the right side. Also, please feel free to interact using the chat box. We will be participating in the chat box as well. So if there's opportunities where you can share information or share experiences, then please feel free to do so at that point in time. Also, we want to make sure that near the end that you complete the evaluation. Again, the evaluation is an important tool to let us know how to improve and to be able to continue to offer webinars like this. And without further ado, I'd like to, again, bring forth our facilitator, Jody Sue Kelly, who will be leading the session. So again, thank you, and Jody Sue, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stephen. So good afternoon, everyone. I guess first of all, I should tell you, I'm the only person on the webinar who actually cannot see the chat box. So Stephen, from time to time, I'll ask him to look at it for me. I can only see it at the end. Anyway, I assume that everyone knows me by now. I'm still Jody. For any new people that may have joined this, I've been working with TANF and WIOA type programs for, this is my 40th year. So as Stephen said, this is our last webinar in our case management series for OFA, and that makes me both happy and it makes me sad because I really enjoyed the opportunity to present to all of you and to get to know those of you who went the extra mile and submitted homework and attended our office hours, and we have one more of those to go. So this workshop series has really been designed to focus on case management strategies that help your clients to become more engaged in their own futures. So in the first session, I attempted to provide tips and techniques for improving the motivation, engagement, and participation of the clients by looking at our own systems. We want to create an experience for the clients that gives them hope and encouragement to invest in themselves. So we looked at the entire program from the client's perspective to identify points at which motivation was waning. So, because we can change how we implement the programs to keep motivation alive. In the second session, we examined motivational interviewing techniques really as a way to build relationships with the clients, to empower the clients to make their own choices, and to help them to just walk through the entire process of making such a significant life change. Our third session was on writing stronger case notes. In that session, we were really focused on writing case notes that were always forward planning and not backwards looking, so that clients would place more value on our interactions, but also to give them a positive sense of achievement all along their journey. So today, we're going to move to the more sort of programmatic issues in terms of how we can improve the employment outcomes for our clients, because improving employment outcomes is a challenge for any TANF program, but even more so with the tribal TANF. So today we're going to be covering as many topics as I could fit into a short webinar. This is just an abbreviated list, but I wanted to start out by outlining some of the basic challenges that tribal TANF faces, which sort of lays the foundation for the importance of the strategies that we're going to be covering. So we're going to talk about some ways to get more clients to consider education. We're going to talk about, part of what I want us to look at is how to sell it, and how to use motivational interviewing to present education. We will look at what people should be training for, like what the high demand jobs are. And then on the employment side, we're going to look at strategies for getting more employers on board. But of course, in tribal areas, sometimes there aren't that many jobs that are available, especially if it's seasonal. So I want us to spend a bit of time talking about micro-enterprise as an employment strategy. So there's a gentleman named Dr. Algernon Austin. He's a senior research fellow at the Center for Global Policy Solutions. And he has a whole lot more background, but I'm not going to bore you with it. But he wrote a briefing report titled Native Americans and Jobs, the Challenge and the Promise, which really examines the problem of the low rate of tribal employment. And he outlined strategies to address it. I sort of synthesized his 37-page paper down to 5 bullets. It's not really fair to him that I synthesized it that far, but I do encourage you to read the full paper to learn more. But Native American and Alaskan Natives face clear economic challenges, which is no surprise to anybody who's on this webinar. There's higher poverty. 1 out of 4 live in poverty. And in contrast, it's 1 out of 10 non-Hispanic whites live in poverty in the United States. Native American and Alaskan Natives have significantly higher unemployment. The odds of being employed is 31% lower than those of non-Hispanic whites. So without work, I mean, obviously, it's difficult for an individual to rise out of poverty because no patchwork of social programs, housing, LEAP for utilities, TANF, no patchwork of these programs provides enough to raise a family out of poverty. People have to have jobs. It's a foundational step. So adding to the challenge of Native Americans and Alaskan Natives is the lower high school and college graduation rates in those populations. So Dr. Austin argues and points out with lots of research that focusing on educational attainment is the factor most likely to increase a tribal member's odds of securing employment. The better educated a population is, the higher its employment rate. So you have your work really cut out for you in helping tribal members improve employability, because while TANF programs in and of themselves cannot solve all the challenges that members face, TANF and you, I think, as case managers, can be instrumental in creating opportunities to increase both education and employment. There are many examples of tribes using initiative, creativity, cultural traditions to improve the economic condition of their members. I'm hoping that this webinar can contribute to us thinking differently and maybe more broadly about how we can increase employment now, but also for future generations. And I'm hoping that in our office hours later this month, we can spend time learning more about all of the creative approaches that are being implemented in your areas so that everyone can learn from each other. So we have, what's on the screen is a myriad of options available to us to increase skills, employability, and the income of TANF recipients. Those listed on the slide are all of the options that are available to TANF recipients and are the tools that we can use to help people pull themselves up from poverty. It seems to me that given the challenges of this population, as well as just TANF recipients in general, we don't want to leave any of these options laying on the floor because we're going to need all of them. So I went and I looked up the latest report that was available on OFA's Tribal TANF page, and I know the latest report, it says 2015, I'm sure the 2016 numbers will be posted soon, but my best guess is that the patterns of activities have remained fairly consistent. So these numbers represent the cumulative numbers for all tribal TANF programs across the country. I researched this because I wanted to get a sense of what services we gravitate toward and which services aren't being used as frequently. What services, what options, what strategies are maybe we leaving on the floor. The highest number of activities you can see is in the other category. It's tribal allowable work activities. That's at 61.4%. Unsubsidized employment is at 22%. Job search, job readiness, 18%, and then community service at 14.9%. So those are the top four. What I was a little surprised by was the lower percentages for education, for vocational training, and also for subsidized employment and OJT. OJT is 1%. So, let's talk a little bit about that. A long and winding road. So 50 years ago, those people who didn't have a high school diploma, and I'm old enough to remember this, people who didn't have a high school diploma could still land well-paying jobs and support their families. In fact, many of my family, grandfathers didn't have high school diplomas. They worked as coal miners. I had uncles who did the same thing. But times over that 50-year period have really changed. So today's jobs require the jobs that require relatively little education are increasingly done by machines. We see this more and more. Self-checkouts at the grocery store, touch-screen kiosk for placing food orders at national chain restaurants, and just yesterday, I got a mailing from Maryland Department of Motor Vehicles that said basically I can save $5 if I use the self-service kiosk to do my own emissions testing on my car so that I can get my inspection sticker. So jobs are more and more being automated if they're at this low skill level. So individuals who fail to earn a high school diploma are really at a serious disadvantage. So in March of 2014, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics found that high school dropouts are over twice as likely to be unemployed than high school graduates. So, and even when a dropout is employed, they earn about $8,000 less a year than a high school graduate. Then Georgetown Center on Education and Workforce projected that by the year 2020, 65% of all jobs will require some form of education after high school. So even high school won't be enough. And then I want us to look at a particular subgroup, and that's ex-offenders. Data based on inmates is basically, it's pretty sparse, but in 2004, which was the most recent data that I could find, did a survey of inmates in state and federal correctional facilities, and they found that high school dropouts make up a total of 67% of America's prisons. So that doesn't mean that all dropouts become offenders, but it does mean that the majority of people in prison did not complete high school. So then when we look at American Indian and Alaska Native students, they have a dropout rate that's twice the national average, the highest dropout rate of any United States ethnic or racial group. So about 3 out of every 10 Native students drop out of school before graduating from high school, and that's both on reservations as well as in more urban areas. And so obviously that's going to impact future earnings, their futures, their earnings, and I think their wealth. So one of the things I want to look at to improve employment outcomes is looking at ways to improve educational outcomes, because all of the variables that Dr. Austin identified, educational attainment produced the largest positive effect on the odds of tribal employment. So I want to start here, really kind of for two reasons. First, because the research shows that focusing on educational options will help TANF clients in the long run increase their employability. Every program, and certainly in the work that I've done in the last 40 years, I've seen that every program, and sometimes that's within a state, and sometimes it's just a program within that state, puts a different emphasis on education. Some are really strong on education and training, and others are much stronger on work first. I was a little surprised to read in a 2018 report on the percentage of, this is all TANF recipients. It's not just tribal. They weren't broken out. But when you looked across the entire country, the number of TANF recipients who are participating in education and training, the average was just 6.6%. The TANF rules say that up to 20% of the caseload can be in education, and tribal TANF gets to make their own rules. So education appears to be an area, to me at least, that's been underutilized in order to give the people the skills to not just get an entry-level, low-paying job, but to move up, make more, have a career path. My second reason for thinking about education and putting this together is thinking about the children of the clients. Improving the TANF recipient's education will reduce the child, will influence the child, and the child's commitment to education, because educational attainment is influenced strongly by the family. So if we want to reduce the dropout rate in future generations, then we may want to place more emphasis on education, the education of the parents. So maybe part of the issue is that clients don't want to buy education. It sounds grueling. Maybe they have bad memories of education. Maybe due to transportation issues and child care issues, they feel that they can't participate. Maybe doing job search and getting a job just sounds easier. I'm not sure. I think that you would all know that better than me. But based on the numbers participating in education, I do think that we need to combine better selling of education along with using motivational interviewing to understand what is holding them back from their perspective. From our motivational interviewing workshop, you'll remember that there are 3 factors that influence a person's motivation to change, and that's their readiness, that's their willingness, and that's their confidence. So I wrote 9 motivational interviewing questions that evoke change talk that can help us to understand where the client is. So, and they pretty much go across the blue, the green, and then the lowest row. So what is your passion? What excites you? What things would you need to do in order to turn your passion into an income? And is there anything that you would need to learn or study to be more expert in your passion? So you can see that I'm trying to lead it toward education. What do you know now that you wish you knew in high school? What might be some positives about finishing your school? What holds you back from going on in your education and training? So we can figure out what the challenges are and their readiness, willingness, and ability. And then the last row, I was looking at tying it to children. How much education would you like your children to complete? What things can you do to ensure that your child sees that you value education, and how important do you think that is to you getting ahead and being successful? So you might remember a slide I showed you in an earlier presentation. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But what motivational interviewing says is you can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink, but you can help make him aware of his thirst so that he wants to drink. So these are all designed in order to evoke that kind of change talk. But I do think also that we could do a better job marketing education. I'll show you a few slides that make this attempt. They're very simple in concept. This one, it just sells financial gains. And like I said, the statistics bear this out. If it's an $8,000 a year difference between a person with a diploma and a person without, and you assume that most people work 40 years, that's $320,000 in a lifetime. That's what that piece of paper means. So this is the type of flyer. It's very simple picture with a quick headline, but it's the type of flyer I might give to someone who's sitting in the waiting room to get them thinking. I would give them an entire packet, of course, not just one flyer, but this might be one of them, because what I want to do is start planting the seeds of them thinking about education. So here's one that that takes the child angle. So when you do this, she'll do this. Sell education as a way to influence your child's education, because the more highly educated adults there are in a community, the more the children will be aspired to be highly educated when they become adults, because children model what they see. So helping the parent earn his or her diploma, I think, sets the expectation to the children that education is important, and I think it can help expand the vision of what is possible and inspire them to likewise pursue education. The more TANF develops human capital of the tribal TANF, I think the better the overall economic development of the community will be. So here are two more flyers. One is from a real program in Louisiana. That's the one on the left, and the other one I made up. I love the headline in the Louisiana flyer. The expert in anything was once a beginner, which basically gives you permission to not know so much about a thing. Obviously, this one was a healthcare project. And then the one I mocked up, these are high school dropouts. They earned their diplomas, and so can you, is based on an advertising campaign that a nationwide program that I work for used to recruit non-high school completers to our workforce programs. And I think it's just the juxtaposition of these are high school dropouts, and then you see people with caps and gowns. So it's another flyer that could go into that packet. But another approach would be to bypass the training per se and show pictures of people doing the jobs. Again, remember from our first webinar that you want to get people to dream and to see pictures in their mind's eye of their dream, because it helps people to move from their comfort zones. When I can see this picture in my mind, I become a little bit more uncomfortable where I'm at right now. So depending on what vocational training programs are available in your area, you could do flyers, or better yet, ask for flyers from the schools that have pictures of people doing the jobs to again, keep planting those seeds. So I put together a list of your short-term training certificates that will give you skills to get a job, or even perhaps that we'll talk about to get a new to start a business. So none of these are in the high pay category, but they're in the short-term training category. So you want to give options. We don't want to just ask people, do you want to go to training, or are you interested in getting your high school diploma? Give them a list of things that are available in the area that they can think about. Put those in your packet of information so that they can use it as a takeaway and think about it later. OFA actually has a very specific program that is training TANF recipients and other low-income individuals in the healthcare field. The program is called HPOG, Health Program Opportunity Grants, HPOG provides short-term vocational training. It's all in the healthcare field, often through a community college. But its distinguishing feature is that while the student is attending community college, they have an HPOG case manager to help them through the training with things like supportive service, tutors, job openings, counseling, whatever the student needs. It's very similar to what you do, with the exception that everyone in HPOG goes to healthcare. So it's a sector strategy program. And healthcare, personal care, like home health aid, CNA, things like that, and construction will be the largest three sectors of job growth from 2002 to 2015, if all the predictions hold true. Here, I'm pictured with a group of students from Turtle Mountain who had completed their medical classes, and what they needed was intensive job search training to begin their job search. They were going to be competing against other graduates, and so they really needed to hone in on those job search techniques. So I spent 3 days with the students and the staff looking at how to organize and deliver an effective, participatory, motivational job search training class. I'm the tall woman in the back row who does not have a certificate in her hand. So here are 30 jobs where people can find employment, because these jobs have more demand than they have supply of trained workers. And look at the pay ranges. Those are $35,000 to $51,000. In the summer of 2016, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported, get this, I think this is shocking to me, 7.8 million Americans were unemployed, 7.8 million. But in the very same month, there were 5.8 million available construction jobs. While not every unemployed American could physically work in construction, those numbers put things sort of in a staggering perspective for me. There are less skilled workers than there are skilled jobs. So I was thinking about it because at the high school level, vocational school programs, when I was in high school, we had a VOTEC as part of the high school, and it used to provide productive alternatives for students who were not academically inclined. However, since the 1990s, there's been a steady decline in vocational career programs at the high school level because the emphasis has been put on academics, at least in part, because of all the standardized tests that now students have to take so that a school can get its funding. So in many schools, at-risk students have not been presented with vocational education that would prepare them for a career path. And that's a shame, because when you look at this list, that kind of training could have led to high-paying jobs. Instead, for a lot of the students who are academically challenged, they just drop out. So I looked at all of the tribal-operated colleges. Well, I didn't look at all their websites, but I looked at least a half a dozen and looked at, outside of the AA degree, what kind of vocational training programs are they offering. And what I found was that there was pretty much a match between the jobs that they have, vocational training programs that they have available, and those listed above. And not all of them, some of them, but not all of them are even required a high school diploma. So it's just my dream that we could move from 8.4% of TANF clients in vocational training to 10% in vocational training, and then, maybe then 12%, but that we can really focus on increasing that number, because I really do believe that the number that I've already told you, which is if you're not getting vocational training, if you're not getting some kind of skill, there are going to be fewer and fewer jobs. So some students may be lacking in transportation, or maybe have other challenges that would prevent them from physically attending a school. And for them, there are online options that can be investigated. I'm listing a few that I'm aware of from working with TANF agencies across the country. I only went as far as finding one per category of some of the online options. The first three are free: Allison, US Learns, and Free GED. In chat, if you're using, like, you include any name of any online program that you use that's been successful for skill training, for academics, for certifications, job search, because we can pull that list off a chat after this session, type it up, and include it as a download so that you can see what some of your sister programs have found to be useful and successful. I've also listed Matrix. Matrix is not free, but it is low cost. A TANF program that I work with in Florida uses Matrix, so I called them to find out what's the response of the TANF recipients, how much does it cost them to use it. Anyway, I got a little bit of information from my Florida friends, and then I called and talked to the owner of Matrix. And there were two things that really interested me about Matrix that I wanted to share with you. The first thing that interested me was that they have 100+ industry recognized online certificate programs, and they also offer over 5,000 courses, so there's something for everybody. I did quickly look through their website, and they definitely were things that our clients go into. The students can do as much or they can do as little as they like. Of course, if they do very little, they're not going to end up with a certificate. But my thought was that this would help those students those clients who have transportation difficulties get training and certifications as long as they have internet access. The second thing that I really liked about Matrix was this report. Now, this is a dummy report to give you an idea, but we have problems with clients not keeping track of their hours or reporting inaccurate, inflated hours for things that they're saying that they're doing. Matrix has accounted for this problem and tracks the amount of time that a student spends within the program. So you can see in that far right-hand corner that we have Shauna has spent 11 hours and Jose has spent 4. So the case manager can pull up a report for anyone on his or her caseload to see how the client is progressing or not progressing, whatever the case may be. But clients, it seems to me, need to be encouraged and coached. It's easy to keep thinking, oh, I'll just do that tomorrow. I know, because I'm taking an online course, and always put off, what you could do tomorrow, put it off today. So I understand that. But what I like about this report is this allows the case manager to stay on top of who internet learning works for and who it doesn't work for, because some people are better at self-regulation than others. So this might be worth exploring if you're looking to increase skill training options for those who cannot get to a class. And I'm hoping, again, I can't see chat, that you're putting down some other options that we can send out in a downloaded report. So the bottom line is that education is a major piece of improving employment outcomes. But now let's look at the employer side and make sure that you're all, everybody's making full use of all the tools, options, and strategies that are available to you. First, employers are risk averse when it comes to hiring. I've trained private sector small business owners, corporate human resource personnel on hiring and job retention. And here's a couple things I learned. First of all, the entire process of hiring and firing is not something employers particularly enjoy. So they look for any red flag that they see in order to be able to screen a person out of a job. They spend more time screening people out, definitely, than they spend screening people in. And part of the reason for that is they're risk averse. So let's say that you have a guy who loves air conditioning, heating, refrigeration, and so he started his own business. He grows the business, and now he needs another employee, and then he needs another and another. What he loves doing is HVAC. What he doesn't love doing is personnel. No one wants to hire somebody who seems risky to them. Thus, why employers don't like hiring the long-term unemployed. They don't like hiring job hoppers. They don't like hiring ex-offenders or other hard-to-serve groups. They prefer to avoid the risk unless there is some compelling argument to hire the person. So there are a few strategies that you can use for reducing the risk to employers. First, make sure that before your clients are looking for jobs, that they're actually job ready. I'm going to cover that here in a minute. Second, there is federal bonding. I'm not sure how many of your programs are using that, but the mission of federal bonding, the federal bonding program, is to give employers peace of mind by bonding job candidates considered to be higher risk. So the federal bonding program provides like a fidelity bond for the first 6 months of employment. And what that does is it protects the employer from employee dishonesty, including theft and any other such risk that an employer would perceive. Employers receive the federal bonds free of charge as an incentive to hire high-risk applicants. In your area, WIOA is likely the agency in your area that would do the bonding. The higher risk clients include justice-involved citizens, so we also call them ex-offenders, individuals in recovery from substance abuse, welfare recipients, individuals with poor credit histories, economically disadvantaged youth and adult if they lack a work history, and anybody who has been dishonorably discharged from the military. So if you're not using the bonding program, that's a place to look because that does reduce the risk. Third, the Work Opportunity Tax Credit is a tax credit given to the employer for hiring hard-to-place individuals. And who are hard to place that we work with: welfare recipients, SNAP recipients, justice-involved individuals, and there are other groups, but those are the ones that I thought most applied to this webinar. The tax credit is worth different amounts depending on which group they hire the person from. So a short-term TANF recipient, short-term meaning been on for 9 months, there are different rules for every group and detailed criteria that you can find online. But for hiring a short-term TANF recipient, an employer can get $2,400 in a tax credit. A long-term TANF recipient, $9,000 as a tax credit. SNAP food recipient, $2,400. And a recently released felon, $2,400. The felon, I believe, had to be released from jail in the past year. So the monetary incentive for reducing their taxes makes some of the high-risk clients a whole lot more attractive. My experience, money talks to employers. So fourth, and probably fifth as well, I'll combine those, OJT, as well as a subsidized work experience program, in essence, give employers a chance to try before they buy. TANF is permitted to do OJTs, but as I showed you in the statistics, hasn't really availed itself of that option. Only about 1% are in OJTs. But OJTs basically pay a percentage, and in some areas as high as 75% of the wages during a negotiated length of time that it would take a client to become proficient in that particular skill. So in either case, whether it's OJT or work experience, the employer trains the individual and the agency picks up a percentage of the wage, and in some cases, work experience, all of the wage. WIOA can provide and pay for OJT. They can do classroom training. They do subsidized work experience. So I think closer coordination and co-enrollment in TANF and WIOA is critical, because WIOA can package vocational training with an OJT and a work experience. So somebody goes to vocational training and then they get up to a 6-month OJT or work experience. But the reason that's important is because many jobs, a lot of employers say must have 1 year experience, even for like a CNA or home health aide must have 1 year experience. Well, the person just got out of school. They don't have 1 year of experience. They just got trained in this thing. So how do I get the 1 year experience if you won't give me a job, but I got to have 1 year to get the job? Doesn't make sense, but the OJT work experience or even WIOA could do an internship. They can be used to close that gap so that the person gets 6 months of experience on that OJT program. But something else I learned in talking to employers at the workshops and sessions that I've done with private sector, and this is especially true for the small employers, was they were excited to learn that once a client is working on a job, that the agency was still there to sort of operate like an off-site human resource office. They like the idea that they could call a person and tell them that the employee was having a problem with transportation, with child care, or some work behavior, and someone else would deal with it and resolve it. They actually didn't understand why this wasn't promoted more by agencies as a selling point. Other workers who they hire don't come prepackaged with the human resource representative, so this can be a risk aversion sales point. So in TANF, job search is limited to 6 weeks or 12 weeks if you have high unemployment, and I know that you can stretch that out. But what I see is that it's oftentimes used as the default first activity for clients, even when the person is not really job ready. Now, it makes sense to use job search training up front, or job search to give them training up front to get people ready and to prepare them for job search. But it doesn't make as much sense to send people out on a job search when they aren't job ready, because then they're burning bridges before they even cross them. Even in the small town that I was raised in, there were only a handful of businesses that someone with limited work experience and education could apply for, and this creates another problem, that clients are forced to overinflate their hours on job search to meet a 20 or 30 hour per week criteria. We sort of force them to exaggerate because there aren't that many jobs in their area, in the region, for them to apply for. But then if we look at it on the employer side, it's frustrating for them, because if unqualified people are applying just to meet a requirement, I'm spending lots of time looking at unqualified people, and that sort of leads to another quandary. And that is, what is job ready exactly? I mean, how would I know it when I see it? What I see is that there's a disconnect between how case managers define job ready and how job developers define job ready, and that causes internal issues. There's also a disconnect between how TANF defines job ready and how WIOA defines it. TANF needs participation hours. WIOA needs placement, job retention, earnings gains, and credentials. So WIOA is generally more hardcore about what is job ready, because their performance is based on helping people to get those jobs. So oftentimes this is how case managers see job ready. we need an activity to assign them to, and job search is sort of the go-to activity, or the person says, oh, I'm desperate for a job, I really need to get a job. And so if they're desperate for a job, then that makes them job ready. And as it turns out, that doesn't really make them job ready. So the client is out looking for jobs, yet doesn't have the skills and the job or the job search know-how. They might not have plans for challenges like transportation or child care, to name a few. I mean, we'll ask clients, so if an employer offered you a job, could you start immediately? And they say yes. Then an employer offers them a job, or we find out about a job, and we call the client and say, hey, this employer has a job and you could start immediately. And then they'll go, well, no, I can't. And they weren't really ready. So that's how case managers look at it. The job developer is looking at the client through the employer's eyes and thinks, I don't want to put a ring on that, quoting Beyonce. This person isn't job ready. So tension arises because case managers are thinking job developers aren't trying hard enough, and job developers think case managers don't understand what it takes to be job ready. I can just tell you that it is a heavy lift to sell something that doesn't work. I was a job developer and a case manager. I had both roles in one. And it was very difficult to sell clients when they did things like no call, no show to interviews, or when they accepted a job and didn't even show up the first day. So generally speaking, in my program, we would lose the employer when that kind of stuff happened, especially if it was the first person they had ever hired from us. So here's some common issues that blow up on the job. If you read the literature, these are things that drive employers nuts: using cell phones on the job and doing text messaging, showing up late, not at all, leaving early, making up their own rules, or that the person has so many personal life interferences and crises that oftentimes they're not at the job. The first three items are soft skills. The last one is personal challenges. So if the person isn't trained in these soft skills, or they haven't sort of planned around their personal life, and the employer hires them, then what we end up with is a dissatisfied employer. And sadly, the bias and the stereotype from one employee who didn't work out is suddenly applied to everyone in that particular group. So for me, when an employer hired one of my non-high school graduates and it didn't work out, the employer would say, I'm never hiring a high school dropout again, which unfairly stigmatizes the rest of the clients and reinforces a stereotype that is not true. So we need to protect our relationship with businesses to get employer support. I think we've got to have a quality product. So my recommendation would be that we reserve actual job search for those who have met this list. First of all, they need to have a plan for any challenge like daycare and transportation. Until those are resolved, they're not job ready, no matter how many applications that they fill out. They need to have a quality resume, a quality cover letter, a contact number that actually works, an interview outfit, a usable email address, not like hotsexybabe@hotmail.com. They need to have references lined up. We need to make sure that they can pass an online personality test. Do they have the appropriate attire? I mean, those are just minimums. The client needs to show positive work habits and attitudes, like do they show up to you on time? Do you see evidence that they have quit or been fired from a job in the past? And have we dealt with that? Because patterns tend to repeat themselves. And of course, they need to have the prerequisites for the jobs in your area. This, of course, depends on the type of career path that they want to be on. But what this takes us assessing each of these things and then planning around those that are missing. So in my mind's eye, I sort of see a checklist to make sure that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed before I say that they're job ready. So the problem that I see is that job seekers oftentimes have no clue whatsoever how decisions are made by employers. I mean, if you haven't sat on the employer side of the desk, it's difficult to know how do they screen, what's a red flag, what's a no-no, what kind of things can you get away with at work, what can't you. It's as though there's this brick wall between them. And when you don't understand how employers make decisions about hiring, then you do things like write conflict with supervisor as a reason for leaving a job, because a lot of clients will go, well, that's what happened. It's like, maybe that's what happened, but you don't write that down. So they don't understand how employers like perceive a job hopper, that somebody who hops from one job to another and has a lot of short-term type jobs, why that's a red flag and why like you need to build a stronger work history, because they really are not seeing it from the employer's perspective. So part of what the program has to do, I think, is to help them get ready for job search, is to help them understand the employer's point of view. So we need to break a hole in that wall so they can understand how hiring, how layoff, how firing decisions are made, because knowledge changes attitudes, and then clients can adjust their approach and hopefully become more successful. So let me give you an example I'll give you two examples of things that I think are important to understand. So employers look at three things when they're considering hiring a job applicant. Does the person have the skills and qualifications for the job? Will they fit in and be a productive member of the team? And if I hire the person, are they going to stay? Because employers hate turnover. So if you fail any one of those categories, you're not likely to get the job. So if we just look at the job interviewing aspect, although they're using those on cover letters, they're using them on telephone calls, they're using them in interviews, they're using them when they review resumes. I mean, really, they screen based on those three criteria, no matter what job screening method that they're using. But if you just look at the job interviewing aspect, think about how we prepare people for job search. We often give people, clients, a list of interview questions that are likely to be asked. So here's 50. I'm not expecting that you read those, by the way. I just wanted you to see it as a handout. But we'll tell clients, read through the questions and make sure that you have answers in case a particular question is asked. And I'm telling you, I think this list hurts more than it helps, because it's too overwhelming. I mean, what do clients do? Do they read it? Do they study it? Do they take it home, write out 50 note cards with potential answers, memorize their answers, and then spout them back during an interview? I don't think so. I think it gets thrown on the side of a table, and they don't look at it again. I couldn't memorize 50 answers. The list is just impossible. And so it gets put aside, and the job seeker wings it. And winging it leads to messing up and saying something wrong so they don't get the job. So clients need to be able to think like employers think to increase their chances. So I think if we simplified this for our clients, it would be easier to learn and easier to be successful, and we'd have way more employers who were impressed. So I didn't take all 50 of the questions or all the 50 questions from the previous page because they wouldn't fit on a slide. So I took 21 and basically sorted the questions into our three categories. Every single question that you get asked in an interview is just a way to assess one of the three questions in the dark orange. Do you have the skills and qualifications? Will you fit in? Will you stay on the job? Let's just take the middle column. Will you fit in as a member of this team? How do you think your coworkers will describe you? What are they really asking? Will you fit in? Do you prefer to work alone or with others? Why? What are they really asking? Will you fit in? Can you describe a difficult situation or a task that you had to deal with and how you did so? Or can you describe a conflict that you had on a job and how you resolved it? What are they really asking? are you going to fit in? Are you going to get along here? So you can go, what motivates you? Have you ever gotten angry at work? What happened? Give me an example of a time that you worked as a team. All of those are simply, are you going to fit in? Will you stay on the job? Why'd you leave your last job? What they're listening for is patterns. Besides money, what do you value? What are your goals 5 years and 10 years out? What am I listening for? Is this person going to stay? How long do you anticipate being with this in this job or with this organization? Again, it's a retention question. Are you looking for permanent or temporary? It's a retention question. So my point is, if you understand the question behind the question, then you're more apt to give a better answer. If I know that you were trying to figure out if they'll like me, then I'm not going to say I had a conflict with my supervisor, because the more I understand that, the better that I will do. But another technique that employers use to screen applicants online is through use of personality tests. A big producer and seller of these tests is a company called Unicrew. They sell their tests to many national chains, CVS, Best Buy, etc., places like that. But to give you an example of what these tests are like, I'm going to show you 10 questions. You need to pull out a pencil and a paper and write down on this pencil and paper how you would answer these questions. Write them down in numerical order. There is no right or wrong answer. I'm only going to give you the minute and a half, so work fast. Here they are. So strongly, I should stop this and tell you, it's strongly agree, strongly disagree, or disagree, or strongly disagree. So strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. What is your answer? Sorry. Trying to turn the music back on. Now it won't go on. Giving you a minute. Hoping that you have finished. If you did it very quickly, you should have all 10. So let's review the correct answers. I said there's no right or wrong answer, but that is true in that you are who you are. Having said that, the way the test is scored, there certainly is a right or wrong answer. So here's the correct answer. So see how you did. The first one, it's maddening when the court lets guilty criminals go free. The correct answer is strongly disagree. You love to listen to people talk about themselves, strongly agree. You're a fairly private person, you strongly disagree. You have no big regrets about your past, strongly agree. You like to talk a lot, strongly agree. You're somewhat of a thrill seeker, strongly disagree. You like to be in the middle of large crowds, strongly agree. Other people's feelings are their own business, strongly disagree. You have to give up on some things you start, strongly disagree, and you would rather not get involved in other people's problems. You strongly disagree. So right now in chat, you can type the number that you got right, and I will tell you the first time I ever took it, I got 0. And then for point of comparison, to pass this, for a private sector employer, you have to get 80% or better right, so 8 out of 10. If you got 6 out of 7 out of 10, it is a maybe for bringing you in for an interview. And if you got 5 or fewer, you're in the don't interview pile. So I'm seeing that maybe some of us need to keep our day jobs. But what I want you to just see is that if you look at the rules for taking personality tests, there are ways to learn how to take these tests. The rules pretty much apply to any of the personality tests. Yeah, I'm seeing 1, 2, 3. It's sort of popping up on my screen. Let's look at what these rules are. And then I'm going to have you do it again, but with a few different questions, so get ready. So study the rules. First of all, use extremes. You notice that the correct answers are always strongly agree, strongly disagree. They don't want people in the middle. So treat the questions as if they were true and false. Change any word that you can to customer, patient, or client. Let me show you an example. You love to listen to customers talk about themselves, or you love to listen to patients talk about themselves. You like to be in the middle of large crowds of customers. Your patients' feelings are their own business. I think that by substituting the word, you begin to get a sense of which side of the equation you should be on. And the other option is to look for a key word or a key phrase. So in the first one, which almost everybody misses, it's maddening when the court allows guilty criminals to go free. The key word is maddening. No employer wants to hire somebody who has issues of anger. I mean, for one, there's a liability issue. If you have an employee who comes in and is angry, and, I mean, you see that kind of thing on national news. Or, notice number 6, you're somewhat of a thrill seeker. Trust me, Walmart does not want to hire somebody to run a forklift who wants to go in the back room and pop wheelies with the forklift. They want people who just do their job. So you go to the extremes, change the word if you can, and then look for a key word. So with those 3 tips, I think our clients can do better, and so can you. But the issue is, to me, and then I'll show you the test, is that people oftentimes answer these not from an employer's perspective, but from their personal life perspective. We need them thinking like employers, because I've watched TANF customers fill these out in a resource room, and they rush right through them as though they're not even reading. So here, I'm going to give you 5. Go. See if this will play now. Okay. I think that's probably enough time. So I'll shut it off. So, because it's only 5. So you've answered those. How did you do? My guess is that you're going to do a lot better. So let me go over what the answers are. The first one, you know people are in a bad mood, even if they don't show it. Strongly agree. I know when customers are in a bad mood, even if they don't show it. You can wait patiently for a long time. Strongly agree. You are unsure of what to say when you meet a patient. I strongly disagree. You like to take frequent breaks when working on something difficult. Strongly disagree. And there are some customers you really cannot stand. I strongly disagree. So my guess is most of you got 5 out of 5. So with some quick preparation, yep, I'm seeing it, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. With quick preparation, people can do better. If job seekers don't know how to take this test, they will never get called in for an interview, because you have to pass the personality test in order to get into the interview pile. So make sure whatever job search training that customers are going through, cover personality tests. If they're doing job search as a first activity without instruction, my guess is they're blowing it, just like we all blew it when we first took the test. So bottom line is, here's what I'm saying, is that if we miss one of these factors. People don't have plans for challenges. They don't have appropriate job search tools that meet these minimum standards, like taking personality tests. They haven't demonstrated work habits and attitudes, or they don't have the skills, credentials, and prerequisites that the employer seeks. Then we need to install a revolving door, because that client's going to be right back. And hopefully we didn't alienate our employer along the way. So once the client is job ready, let's be realistic, 8 to 10 hours of actual job search per week in most communities is a thoughtful approach. I mean, if you think about in your community, what's realistic given the number of employers that are out there, especially if it's off season, because I really don't want clients making up stuff and like exaggerating how many job applications they filled out and what they did. So it seems to me 8 to 10 is about right. In general, based on U.S. Department of Labor information and other top sources, a job seeker, it takes people 3 to 6 months to get a job. So my suggestion is combine job search with another core activity. And as you know from what I've already said, I'm sort of big on education. There are also new opportunities to partner with WIA youth programs. I did mention WIOA before, but I do want to make one other point. And some of you will know this and others of you might be less familiar. But I think that all tribes have a TANF, but also have WIOA. But they haven't always worked well together. But definitely you have a new opportunity to work together across all programs, but especially in the youth program. So here are a few things to know. Nationwide, 25% of all TANF recipients are under the age of 25. So you can look at your own caseloads and see that. Anyone under 25 is a candidate for WIOA for co-enrollment. 75% of WIOA youth funds must be spent on out-of-school youth, and the definition of out-of-school youth is anybody up to age of 24. So you have clients that they need. I was just in Ohio last week for 2 weeks, traveling around the state doing training, and the WIOA programs are desperate to find out-of-school youth. You have the youth they need sitting in your offices. So, and because WIOA, as the law changed, it became more focused on work-based opportunity and learning, they have to spend a minimum of 20% of their money on work-based activities such as work experience, internships, job shadowing, on-the-job training. They also can pay for tuition at schools, and they have a host of other services that marry well with TANF. So why I think it's so important with you is because a key predictor of consistent employment in adulthood is early work exposure, so that if you can get the youth tied into WIOA, I mean, hopefully the adults too, that's great. But if you're not closely partnering with WIOA, then that might be something that you want to begin to work on. So I want to move to our last segment, and that is micro-enterprise, starting your own business. So for some clients, their best option may be starting their own business. Women and men who have small children are living in rural areas with limited transportation, and even ex-offenders may be best helped by helping them to do something on their own. I know that you may be thinking, our clients can't start a business, but please just hear me out on this. Micro-enterprise programs in the United States have been in existence a little over 30 years, and what they do is they help the poor pursue economic self-sufficiency through self-employment. Welfare recipients were one of the earliest targets for these programs. The people recognized early on that among the very poorest in our country, there are people who have the skills to form a successful business, but what they lack is basic business know-how. They lack access to capital, and oftentimes they lack a set of personal skills and a support system that can assist them as they develop the business and travel the road out of poverty. So, like, they might lack customer service skills, as an example of a personal skill. So the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation initiated a project a few years back called Micro Enterprise Welfare to Work Demonstration and Evaluation. There were 10 sites around the country, all TANF, but they used varying approaches to help their TANF recipients start businesses. So some of the programs work to support something that's called income patching. Income patching, this is where clients simultaneously pursue wage employment and self-employment at the same time, so that they're creating two income streams. Another site, one of the 10 sites, focused on a particular sector, child care. And another created a Stop the Clock program design where clients got other jobs just to stop the TANF clock so that they had time to undergo this business training and to be able to start business. So all programs were provided with a common, or all clients were provided with a common set of services that included business planning and management, like economic literacy, individualized technical assistance before and after business startup, and they all got access to business capital, the money to start the business. So there was an initial study, and then they did a 2-year follow-up report. So 2 years after enrolling in this self-employment program, the study participants showed a strong increase in their engagement in work. Not all of them ended up running a business, but they were engaged in work. And for those who were working, the resulting increase in earned income led to very substantial increases in their household income. So as a result, the TANF assistance decreased dramatically, but the changes were the strongest among the programs that did that income patching. People worked and ran a business. Median income went from $10,114 a year to $18,952 during the study period. So that's a difference of $9,000. So it can work, not on everybody, but on some. And I know, and probably there are people online who know this even better than me because it's in your area, but I know that the Apache Youth run an Arrowhead Cafe and Marketplace in Fort Apache, and it has 4.5 stars on TripAdvisor. I was just telling Stephen before we started that I already put that on my bucket list. I'm definitely going there. But it's a program for 13 to 16-year-olds to stay in school, learn entrepreneurial skills, and run a business, so they all work at the cafe. Now, back to the Stewart Mott Foundation. Their study of self-employment. Here are the types of businesses that clients created in the study. Many clients were already working in underground businesses, and what these programs did was brought those businesses above the table so that they could help them grow that business. And we already know there are people who do child care, they do painting, they do cleaning, they do hair, they do nails. They already have, I think, another income stream. But as a small business owner myself, I'm able, and this is one of the advantages to getting above board, I'm able to write off a portion of my house that's dedicated to my business, including my mortgage, part of my utilities, my equipment. I get to depreciate, and so there are tax advantages. But so to start a business, each of these businesses are going to need working capital, money to buy equipment, supplies, and obviously they're also going to need business guidance. So there are nonprofit organizations who specialize in lending money to disadvantaged communities and entrepreneurs to start their own business or to help existing business grow. They work with low-income people who cannot get a loan from a for-profit bank because of all kinds of things. They don't have income, because they have bad credit histories. So I'm most familiar with Kiva, which is lower on the list, but I work with Kiva as a donor. I support micro businesses through Kiva. So I donate money, they pull money from a lot of donors, and then they make loans. And the loans can be as high as $10,000, although I think initially the loans are less. I went online and pretended like I wanted a Kiva loan and read through what their application process was. And, I mean, there are steps you have to take, but it wasn't all that overwhelming. But the entrepreneur then makes monthly loan payments back to Kiva, and that's how all of these work. And what that does is help them build up their credit. The payback is generally, I mean, it's as low as $25 a month. And many of the Kiva recipients have even gone together as a cooperative. So it's 5 to 10 people going together to form one business. The businesses are similar to the ones I showed you, but I've also donated to a man in New Orleans who was starting a security company following Katrina. I donated to 2 men who were starting an auto repair business. So the list of businesses and skills is wide. My guess is they started out as hobby businesses and now they've turned into real businesses. But as a donor, I get repaid a few dollars a month. Because they pull these donations. People, as they pay back, the donors get paid back, and then we just reinvest in somebody else's business. But these lenders provide money for 4 things, and that is working capital, just to get the business started, inventory or supplies. They'll help purchase furniture or fixtures, machinery, and equipment. So these are resources to be able to help. I looked this up, and some tribes are already doing micro-lending internally. 4Bands Community Fund is a nonprofit organization that was started in 2000 as part of a community and economic development movement on the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation. The 4Band CDFI, it's been honored nationwide for their work, because as a community loan fund, it's technically known as Community Development Financial Institution, or CDFI. The original objective was to capitalize Native American-owned businesses on the reservation, because when they began their work, less than 1% of all businesses on the reservation were owned by Native Americans. However, 75% of the population on the reservation was comprised of Native Americans. So since then, they've helped hundreds of Native American entrepreneurs start and expand businesses. When they started, they only gave out $500 loans, but now they've dispersed over $10 million. I mean, and if you look at the list, they've approved 671 credit builder loans so that recipients could achieve an average credit score increase. They've helped to create 597 jobs, and they've connected 183 youth entrepreneurs to local internship opportunities, and then 76% of those went on to post-secondary education. So whether or not you have a CDFI that is dedicated to your tribe, your clients would have access to micro-lenders like Kiva and some of the other ones that I mentioned. So there are, I know that many TANF programs are offering these cultural skill building activities as work activities to lead to self-sufficiency. In fact, one of the first slides I put up, 61.4% of clients are in that type of activity. And this is really great, especially if they can in any way at all involve their children, because research shows that youth who are involved with and learn their cultural traditions and heritage are more likely to graduate from high school. So some of these activities listed above can be turned into businesses in addition to using them as work activities. And as an example, everything that you see in the pictures on this slide are something that I bought from a tribal artist. I was afraid to use internet pictures for fear that they were copyrighted, so I just photographed my own stuff. Some of you might recognize what tribes those are from or what areas. But since the micro enterprise welfare to work demonstrations, many online platforms have made business a little bit easier to transact, at least in the non-service categories. I mean, there are literally hundreds of online platforms. I've listed but a handful. Etsy's the most successful for independent crafts. eBay we're all familiar with. Artfire is really strong in jewelry, and Artful Home is very high-end merchandise. So the point is there are options for selling products. And what I want you to be thinking about is this concept of income patching, having a wage job and supplementing your income with a business to see and to give that business time to grow. So then I was also thinking about other issues that, those are all product businesses, but there are also service businesses. And I know that tribal TANF population, they have many unmet needs. Child care is one of those. Well, one of the micro enterprise welfare to work programs, the Stuart Mott Foundation, focused entirely on helping TANF recipients start child care businesses. So I was fascinated by that, so I looked up what would you need to do to start a child care business in my own home, and this is the list of type of information that I found as a requirement. This was in one state. Honestly, I don't remember what state I looked this up in. I know I didn't use Maryland because we have no tribes in Maryland, but the requirements were just not as onerous as I had imagined, and a microloan would allow the client to fix up their house, which, by the way, again, it becomes a tax deduction, to buy toys and install anything on this list that needs to be installed. Helping TANF clients start a child care business solves three problems. One, it's a job for the TANF client. Second, it provides an enriching environment to the child, which I think can give children a head start educationally. And third, it opens up child care slots for other TANF participants who choose to go to school or to work. And since TANF pays for child care, maybe this is a fourth benefit, because you guys will pay for child care, in a sense, you could use TANF money to kickstart the business by paying to provide child care for other TANF clients. So the question becomes figuring out the needs of the tribe or the TANF clients, then figuring out if there is a way for TANF clients to fill that gap. I looked up Maryland CDFI last night, our Community Development Fund, and just out of curiosity, and in Maryland at least, and I'm sure others will do this as well, they'll help you buy a car, which fits into another tribal need, transportation. So, like hypothetically, this would need to be explored and developed, but a client could buy a van and use it, sort of like Uber and Lyft, and provide transportation services to other TANF clients to get to class and training, because again, TANF will pay for transportation. So I think that there are things that we can do. So I wanted to end with highlighting another project that caught my eye and really got me excited because it's both culturally relevant and it has the seeds of a business. And that was the Bristol Bay Native Association in Dellingham, Alaska. I spoke with Ray Bell Whitcomb to learn more about this project. I believe it's 6 years old, from what I understood, but they provide basic information through classes on growing plants, discussing what kind of soils to use. They give participants the opportunity to meet local gardening mentors. They learn to plant, transplant, how to cut, plant potato seeds, how about raised beds, about composting, canning, how to make seed tapes, and much, much more. Ray Bell told me that running this program is not without a challenge. I mean, clients are on and off TANF roles. You have distance, you have geography, you have climate, you have sunlight. I mean, all of these are challenges, but they have kept it going for 6 years. In Bristol Bay, ask elders, local artists, master gardeners, and schools to come in and host classes, including self-employment classes. They built greenhouses as part of the project, anything to extend the growing season. And what a great work experience building these would be. And it helps the entire community. The TANF program pays instructor costs, pays for materials and rental fees as needed to support the activity. So talk to your own OFA rep to see what kind of things you might be able to do. And successful gardening can lead to business development in farming. Ray Bell told me that some of the clients now participate in farmer markets. You could go with organic gardening and organic farming, which I know in my area is really big. Growing for local businesses like fishing lodges, stores, casinos. It allows villages to grow food for their own village, which leads to self-sufficiency. And then I went online because I was looking at this picture of seed tape, and quite honestly, I was never aware of seed tape until I saw these pictures. And so I was looking at them, and Burpee sells them for $7 for 22 feet. Park Seed Company sells them for 15 feet of zinnia seeds for $9.07. And I started seeing a business here selling seed tape online. I would definitely be a customer. But this is a great example of taking a tribal need, a need for cheaper food, because in Alaska, food is outrageously expensive. When I go to Alaska, and I've been there several times training, I basically just don't eat. It's so expensive. But this is just a great way of thinking about a way that TANF could work to fill a need that the tribe has, while also building the skills of the participant. So in some tribes where jobs are scarce, we really want to help, and we really want to help lift our clients out of poverty. I think we have to think outside the box. Tribes have unique opportunities that other TANF programs don't have, because tribes can define the delivery of services in a way that other TANF programs cannot. So use every tool that you have. So to improve employment outcomes, some over the long term, some over the short term, sell all forms of education, GED, short-term training, long-term career training, set job-ready standards to determine who's ready to conduct an actual job search, partner heavily with WIA-OA to use more work-based learning, explore opportunities to build clients' income through micro-enterprise, and consider work projects that fill tribal needs that can use TANF labor. So thank you so much for attending our series. I really hope that our sessions together have helped in some way. I personally have such a passion for helping the nation's poor to lift themselves up economically, maybe because I was one of them at one time. But let me cover office hours, and then we can see if there's any time left or what we have for questions, and anything we don't answer, we can write up and answers and send them out. So we do have on June 11th or June 21st is when the application exercise will be due. I made it much easier, I think, than what some of the others have. It's more research-based. And then we have office hours on June 28th, and I hope I see some of you guys there, or as many of you as I can. And I'm going to turn it over to Stephen to see if there were any questions.
Again, if you have any questions, please place them in the Q&A box, or you can also place those questions in the chat box. One of the things did come from Nia Evans, who mentioned that WeMat has a similar program under the People's Farm. And right now, I want to see were there any additional questions.
Well, and let me just add to that. I love that. Have me come out. I'm right now, the course I'm taking online is Master Gardening. I think that's why I was so fascinated by that project, because I love gardening. So, yeah, there were a lot of other programs. It was really hard to pick and choose, like which ones to highlight, because I think we could do, well, you guys could do an entire webinar series just on those kind of tribal ideas and creative things that you've come up with. In fact, there's an idea for you, Stephen.
Absolutely. Okay, we're looking to see if there are any questions.
There aren't going to be questions. It's 2:29.
All right. Well, in that case, I want to thank everyone for participating in the webinar. Again, I just want to make sure that when you have the opportunity, please complete the evaluation, because, again, this helps us find ways to better serve you. And with that, I just want to, again, thank Jody Sue Kelly for the marvelous work she's done on this series of webinars. I want to thank all of you for participating actively, in the office hours as well as the chat during the webinars. And we will get this webinar posted as well as some additional tools for you within the following month. So again, thank you. And if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to the Peer Technical Assistance team and come back to the Peer TA website. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.